All right, in this lecture, we're going to learn how to log in a user. And again, the starting point for anything we're building is Django. We got to have a URL for it. So let's go ahead and move into the editor to our URLs. Let's copy what we've got and make a login. So I'm going to change this to login user. And one more time, login user. Okay, so I'll save this. I'm going to come back to my views. And I'm going to add one more function here called login user that takes in a request. Okay, so what's awesome about logging someone is that it's going to be pretty similar to what we've done before with the sign up, and even like ultimately all we're trying to do is call this function inside of this function to say, hey, log in the following user. But in order to do that, we've got to get a username and a password from a form that's been submitted and make sure that those are actually the correct things and, you know, all that jazz here. So it's going to look fairly similar to the sign up. So I'm going to copy what we have there just to get us started. So I'm going to copy those lines, paste it down below. So we still want to say, okay, if it's a get, we should show them the login page. So I'm going to change this to login user. As far as the form goes, instead of the user creation form, we want to use a different form that helps us to log in. So we're going to move up top to the imports, and after user creation form, we're going to hit comma and utilize a new form that Django has helped us with. We're going to do capital authentication capital form. Okay, so we're going to take this authentication form so that when we're logging in, rather than pass them forward the user creation form, we're giving them the authentication form. All right. So that's the get. First, let's just see if this even works. For this, we're going to have to create a login.html. So I'm going to do new file here, login.html. Okay. This is going to look very close to our sign up. So I'm just going to copy all the code that we have for our sign up and paste it into login. Now I'm going to change this title to say login. We'll keep the error showing up there instead of sign up. We're going to change this to login, but really that's the only difference. So we're going to go ahead and save this, come back to our code, and we should make it so that when we click on these, they actually go places. So let's go back to our base. All right, and we'll say that we want a URL, for instance, for when someone signs up. So this should be sign up user. And then also the same thing here, but this should be login user. So we'll save the base, come back, reload this home page and say, hey, I want to log in. I have a couple of users here that I could log in with. And it's telling me I don't have a template. I must have misspelled something. So I'm going to come back. I just called it login. This should be login user. So I'm going to rename that to login user. Let's see if this works now. There we go. So let's say, for example, I pass in the name Haley and the password, right? Okay, we're getting some errors here because it's saying I can't find password 1. And remember, there's a whole bunch of code we have to go change there. But something I want you to notice is if we inspect here, this new form that Django has given us, this input, it's not password 1 anymore. It's just password. Because there's not two passwords, it doesn't have to distinguish each of them. So we can come back into our code and say, okay, well, maybe, you know, all this code where we're passing forward different stuff, the integrity error, we can probably get rid of a lot of that. So really, when we're logging someone in, the big thing that we want to check is whether they've given us the correct username and password. And the way that we can check that is through this function called authenticate. And this is also something that we're going to have to import. So up where we did the login, logout, we also want authenticate. All right. So now we want to say inside of our function, authenticate. And then what we want to pass in here is first the request. Then we want to pass in the username, which will specify username is equal to. And then we also eventually want to pass in what the password and what that's equal to. So for the username, this is when we're going to say request.capital-post. Inside of here, we want the username, and then we're going to copy the same thing and change this for the password. Okay, remember we don't have to say password 1, we can just say password. So what this authenticate will do is it will give us back a user object. And if for some reason this doesn't work, if like the username and the password they gave us didn't match, or like that user doesn't even exist, this user is going to be equal to none. So we can do this if statement that says, okay, if user is none, okay, that meaning like they weren't able to find anything, we want to send them back to the login page, but with an error. And so we're going to do this, and then we're going to add a comma here, add a new entry called error, and we'll simply say something like username and password did not match. Okay, so we'll save this. Let's go ahead and just test this out. We could at least do this. So I'm going to come back to this login page, and I'm going to give in a username that doesn't exist and a password that doesn't even match. Log in, and look, we get our error. Username and password did not match. Okay, so we know that part's fine, and we haven't been logged in. That's good. The question then is, okay, if we did this and it was able to get back a user, that's the else part of this if statement. Okay, so this means we were able to authenticate them. We simply just want to log them in. In fact, we can copy the 2 lines of code that we have here if someone is able to successfully create or sign up for a new user account. So we're just going to copy these, paste those 2 below. Okay, so let's save this, come back to the page and reload. I'm just going to hit enter here. So I'm going to pass in a username of Haley, which we know exists. I'm going to put in their password, and look at that. We are now logged in. So please appreciate this. We have the full authentication stuff basically locked in and ready to go. So if someone comes to the website, they're at the home page, they're given an option to either sign up or log in. So they could sign up. I'm going to make a new account called Ricky. I'm going to do a really simple password. Now I'm logged in as Ricky. I can choose to log out as Ricky, and then I can come back and log in as Ricky. Isn't that excellent? And for all these different things, for the sign up and the login, we have the appropriate errors to say, oh, that username already exists, or those 2 things didn't match, whatever it is. So this is a really big project. That was a huge chunk of it. Give yourself a nice pat on the back for getting this stuff done. Now it's time to move on to the really fun stuff, creating those to-dos, getting them to list out, deleting them. Let's talk about that in the next lecture.